it comes to politics. Yeah, I'm well past the tinfoil hat stage. I need a good helmet for the banging my head against the wall stage. The Kate Daly Show starts now.
Donald Trump has had a disastrous few weeks. If you look at the polls, he needs a miracle. In the American political lexicon, there's such a thing as the October surprise. The stuff that you're sitting on, is an October surprise in there? Do you even know what you're sitting on?
WikiLeaks never sits on material. Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often very significant risks.
Hi there. Welcome. Kate Daly Show at your service. So glad to be with you. Welcome, Salt Lake City and now. And so appreciate you. Tampa, Nevada, all over the United States. Really appreciate you listening in. And, of course, Patriot TV, where you can watch this show in the evening, which I love. Patriot.tv. Go check it out. Become a member of that. The link is right on my website, katedalyradio.com. Okay. And when you go, just go patriot.tv/Kate. There you go. So welcome to the show. Susan is out caring for a relative, and so hopefully she'll be back in a few weeks. And Melissa will join me in the next hour, as she always does on Wednesday. We'll be talking about Independence Day that's coming up and giving people a chance to listen to that before Independence Day, which I always think is a big, huge plus. Today, I'm going to tackle the other side of Julian Assange, the other side of the story. And I think this is so compelling that I think we have to do it. It's a must. Okay. There's too much information here. And that clip, by the way, was from 2016. That was right before the election in 2016. And of course, the bought and paid for mainstream, saying, hey, is there going to be an October surprise? And WikiLeaks saying that they did not sit on any information, even though the emails had been from 2007 and 8 and 9 and so forth, but that they did this about a month before. Remember, they unloaded all those Clinton, Podesta, Obama emails in October, right, of 2016. So that was kind of interesting. I want you to kind of put that on the back plate for just a moment. Also, what I found kind of interesting was in 2019, they did a lot of stories about Julian Assange. And so this is going to bring up so many questions for all of us, that he was frail and weak and dying, but he didn't look that way when they released him. So this is going to get a little interesting today. And I'm merely asking questions. I think that questions are, those are truly where you can really figure out truth, where you can actually get to the bottom of the story. So here we go. Also, I just wanted to say that there are many that are also saying that he was not imprisoned so much as he was sitting in a countryside mansion at the home of Von Smith. And he is the owner of a news organization that is funded by George Soros. That's interesting. The Open Society Institute. And George Soros, very intimately intertwined, who knows how intimately, at this point, given the rumors of how these people operate with the Rothschilds, George Soros Rothschilds. Okay. Also, Soros, a business partner of James Goldsmith. By the way, Soros going after a big significant portion right now of radio. Yeah, very interesting. There are rules to that. We'll see if the FCC bypasses those rules for the George Soros dollar. Okay, so now Biden is saying U.S. is considering, of course, the Australia's request to drop prosecution of Assange, which is going to bring up some more questions for you later on. And he was freed and sent to Australia after pleading guilty to violating U.S. espionage laws, ending this 14-year battle. Now his wife, Stella, is crowdfunding to cover $520,000 of debt here in the United States, GoFundMe account, right? Crowdfunding, $520,000 for the flight, because they say that he was not able to fly commercial. Okay. So I want you to keep all of that on the back burner for just a moment. All of that, all of those little pieces. And I want to go to Julian himself. He was actually born Julian Hawkins, and his father, which really didn't have much to do with his life, because it was his mother's partner, was Richard Assange, okay, who was an actor, known for movies Home and Away and A Country Practice, okay. And so this was her partner. He was down in Sydney, Australia, died a decade ago. But they divorced in 1979, and she became involved, the mother, Christine, became involved with Leif Manel, and also known as Leif Hamilton. And they were a member of this Australian cult called the Family. This is a really weird cult. I'm telling you, this is a really bizarre cult. Of course, Assange had this very nomadic childhood and had lived in over 30 Australian towns by the time he had reached his mid-teens in Melbourne, Victoria. And his mother was a yoga teacher in the mid-60s, Anne Hamilton Byrne. She founded the family cult and then convinced her followers that she was the reincarnation of Christ. And then one of their inspirations was Helena Blavatsky, a Russian-born medium. A lot of this goes into really satanic stuff. This broad was very satanic. She was into all kinds of stuff. And so was this family operation, also known as the Santanican Park Association, or the Great White Brotherhood, as the family was also known. And so they were under this leadership, and Anne Hamilton Byrne was like their show pony. Okay. They were also known as ascended masters. I mean, I'm telling you, they got into some weird stuff. Okay. That the material world was all a creation of the mind. I mean, it was very, very bizarre, paranormal, mediumship, psychics, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of creepy stuff. Okay. Also, they were connected to the New Haven private hospital, and the connections they had were really interesting because this had a lot to do with LSD coming onto the scene. Okay. LSD and the experimentation of LSD. So in the 60s and 70s, this hospital was known and managed by this guy who was a new agey guy. And he was also known as the Family. He was one of their main guys that was in this hospital, owned and managed, and would do these experiments. And there's a lot more on that. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on that, but they had it was a private psychiatric hospital owned and managed by him. And also the psychedelic drugs, they were first synthesized in 1938 by Hoffman in the Sandow's laboratories, And then, of course, surfacing again in 1943, surfacing again when they were starting to do all of this experimentation. And this New Haven hospital was one of those places, okay? So there was a raid in 1987. They went for a pretty long time. And in 1987, it kind of disbanded after the raid, the cult, the family. But it was heavily connected to a couple of people. Number one, Lord Richard Casey. He was employed by Winston Churchill in charge of espionage in Australia, completely hooked up and linked up to their CIA, okay? Ronald Conway, of course, in charge of it. Ronald Conway was also a shrink who engaged in sexual contact between him and his patients. Isn't that sweet? Allegedly. Mm-hmm. Anyway, this cult had been able to go on a long time because of their high-up connections. And his mother was worth over $50 million from her cult at the time. Who was paying her that money? Where did that money come from? Interesting. Usually you think cult, you think hippies, you don't think the people are bringing in a lot. Although there are some that we've actually talked about on the show that bring in their fortune, whatever that is. But that's a lot of money. That would be worth a lot today. So Assange, so basically, I'll get into kind of his career, okay? So he comes from a very strange upbringing that was very well connected. So no wonder we see some of the things we're seeing with some of the celebrities, things like that. I'll get into that in just a moment. But it gets a little weird. So he settled, the family settled in Melbourne, and then he became involved in a hacker community. And he was convicted for hacking in 1996. Now, when I'm looking at research, when I'm looking at these people and I'm thinking, my first thought is, oh, did he get out of that by by consenting to be a actor or a figure in a psyop called here's where you can get the truth, the person's a martyr, and the person is also buoyed up by the media to be a hero, okay? Now, these are all questions. These are all things to ponder. Not telling you how to think about Julian Assange, because you could, I know a lot of people go both ways on this. He's a hero. He's a journalist that's been victimized. But I think this is stuff that's worth thinking about. So when I'm doing research, that's usually where I go first. Okay. Well, it just so happens that in the same year, facing this sentence of 290 years in prison, he struck a plea deal. I know. And pled guilty to 24 hacking charges, including breaches of the Crimes Act and fraudulent use of the telecommunications network. Now, if this was you or I, we'd be serving 290 years in prison. But he didn't. So that is something to think about, okay? Because I did not know that before that question was raised for me. And that was my question was, wow, you see something like that, that's usually the first question I'm asking. In this case, it does give us some plausible reasons as to why he might not be in prison if this information goes this way that I'm talking about in this hour. I always think it's good to look at both sides. You're looking at the hero, you're looking at all the articles, you're looking at all the stories. Some things are not adding up right now. The timing is a little weird, okay, I'll admit. All of a sudden, Biden, it's the brownie points for that administration if they drop charges. Kind of interesting timing, okay? And also, this information could be coincidental. The problem is that I'm not a coincidence theorist. I wish I was, but I'm not. So I'm looking at all these pieces going, this is not adding up to be a good thing. This is not okay. So he started WikiLeaks in 2006, became a member of its advisory board, and traveled all over Africa, Asia, Europe. And then, of course, in 2006, we got the first leak. And this was published in a 5-page essay, outlined the thought experiment behind WikiLeaks' strategy. Okay, so now put that on ice for just a moment. We're going to hit a break. I'm going to be right back, and I got a lot more. To think about. It's always good to think, isn't it? We should be thinking always. Be right back on The Kate Daly Show, katedallyradio.com.
Volatility is just a word until it isn't. It becomes all